I'm not judging it, I am judging it. I'm trying really hard not to, but I am. And I don't want to talk about it anymore because I'm bored. All of this to say, I think you should buy the Blend Bunny Blends palette. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. That was super sweet of you and sweet of you. Look who's here, the intro. How exciting. What an absolute honor to have Bert here today. He's my little man and I love him so much. Oh my goodness, what a sweet man. Let's zoom in on my eye look though. So for today's eye look, do I want to give away eyeshadow details? Because they're gonna be some of the, you saw the title of the video, they're gonna be some of the dupes. So I don't want to fully give stuff away, but I will tell you these sweet little stars that I got in a 3-pack of face gems on Amazon that also came with my little wax pencil tool, and it came with an extra long pair of tweezers. It came with these 3 different packs of gems, all for under $10. Such a freaking sweet deal. I can't stop screaming about it. And this one pack has a bunch of different shapes in it. It's got stars with cutouts, it's got stars without cutouts, they got holographic gems. Just a really good deal if you're looking to get into more euphoria makeup looks, more fun face gems, rhinestone makeup looks. Highly recommend these. I will link them down below for you. But that's not what this video is about. You did not click on this video to find out what cool face gems I'm wearing on my eyes today. No, you clicked on this video because you, like me, have an interest in duping the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. So when this palette first was announced, the first time it was announced, when it was accidentally leaked, the first time it was announced, I was like, I want to buy this. I absolutely want to buy this. I felt like I was finally ready to buy my first full-size Natasha Denona palette, and then it got deleted from Trend Mood and we found out like, oh, it was leaked too early, it's not coming out for a few other weeks. And honestly, that was the best thing for me because it gave me time to really look at it and think about whether or not I needed it. And after giving it all that thought, I realized I don't need this at all. I can so easily dupe this palette. I wasn't even trying to think about dupes. I was just like using other pastel palettes in my collection and I was like, wow, I can dupe this with like just a couple of palettes. I almost was able to dupe it with just 2 eyeshadow palettes. I did have to dip into one more palette literally for just 1 shade. So frustrating, but you know, it's okay. So yeah, I'm gonna be showing you all of my dupes here today. I'm gonna be swatching them for you, and I'm also gonna tell you why, even if I didn't have dupes for this palette, I wouldn't buy it anyways. So if that sounds like a topic that is interesting to you and you want to see me dupe the Natasha Denona Pastel palette, then I encourage you to please subscribe and keep on watching because it's coming at you right now. Alright, so before we get into my swatches of my dupe shades, I want to give a big shout out to Jenna or Gina on Instagram. I'm so sorry if I said her name wrong. I'm gonna put her Instagram handle on the screen, but she uploaded this swatch photo. She was like one of the first people to get this palette and upload swatches to Instagram, and I'm so grateful because, you guys, a little bit of tea here. I feel like, and a lot of other people have said this too, Natasha Denona oversaturates her swatches. I feel like so often her swatches on the website, like these swatches, I can't tell anything from them. Even looking at her swatches versus pictures of the palette, I'm like, it's not computing up here. It's not looking the same. So I'm so grateful that a person who is not a representative for the brand, just somebody who bought this palette, was able to give us swatches because these look a lot more realistic to me, and this is what I based my dupes off of. So now let's get into the palettes I'm gonna be using for my dupes here today. Like I said, I was almost able to do it with 2. I'm so mad I couldn't do it with 2. But the first palette I'm gonna be using is the Blend Bunny Blends palette, and that's where I'm getting, honestly, all of my mattes. If you like pastel mattes and an incredible formula, check out the Blend Bunny Blends palette. It is amazing. I only got this like a month ago, but I think I've used it like 20 times since then. I just love it so much. And then for my shimmers, I'm gonna be using my Copacetic Cosmetics Companion palette that they did in collaboration with Monica Jones, because this has some really beautiful pastel shimmers that honestly are like even shiftier and more beautiful than the Natasha Denona ones. So I feel like they're dupes but better, but definitely still dupes nonetheless. And then I literally need 1 shade from the Wilderness palette. And then I have 1 highlighter because there's 1 shade in the palette that like just looks like a highlighter. So that's what we're gonna be looking for here. Here's what's coming up. And now let's get to swatching. So I'm basing my dupes off of Jenna's swatches from her swatch photo, but I do want to swatch them in the same order as the Natasha Denona swatches because it has names next to them. Just feels less confusing to me. So yeah, let's do it that way. All right, logistics out of the way. So let's start with that first pastel purple shade at the top here, which is called Feather. I have a very easy dupe for that, and that is in my Blend Bunny Blends palette. Like I said, I'm using all of my mattes from here, and I feel like this shade Promise is just a perfect dupe for that because it's kind of, you know, it's a pastel purple, but it's definitely like a pastel pinky purple. So here is my dupe here. Super pigmented, super beautiful. I'm gonna go in with one more just to get some more saturation here. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. I feel like it's a great dupe for the shade Feather. So now let's move on to the shade under that, which I didn't think I had a dupe for until the other day. I used this shade in the Blend Bunny Blends palette. The shade I'm duping, by the way, is called Zest. Ooh, love that. And I feel like my dupe is the shade Wildflower in the Blend Bunny Blends palette. When you look at it from a distance, it just looks like kind of like a bold yellow, but it's definitely got more of a chartreusiness to it. I will say credit where credit is due to Natasha Denona. I really do like that she added kind of like a more zesty, limey shade of green in this pastel palette because I feel like she could have stuck with just mints. So I do think this is a fun add for a pastel palette, but I don't need it because I got this shade from a Blend Bunny Blends palette. All right, moving on to the shade under that, which is called Airy and is just a beautiful pastel sky blue. I freaking love shades like this. Thank goodness I have my Blend Bunny Blends palette and I have this shade, which is called Dream and is also a beautiful sky blue. And this brings us to our first shade that I am wearing on my eyes. I'll zoom you in real quick. I am wearing this shade Dream all up in my crease here. I did add a little bit, just like a touch of white on my brush to make it even more pastel. But yeah, that's shade Dream on my eyes. Now let me show you the shade Dream on my arm. Dipping in one more time to add saturation. Okay, here is my dupe for the shade Airy. All right, so moving down in the lineup of the Natasha Denona swatches, we're gonna move on to the shade Duet, which looks like it's kind of like a purpley blue duochrome. I will say in Jenna's swatches, it really just looks more purple, but I'm gonna try to go off the Natasha Denona swatches for this one because I feel like it is really hard to show duochromes in swatch photos, but I just so happen to have a beautiful purpley blue duochrome for my companion palette. It's the shade Robin. It's absolutely freaking stunning and I think it's a great dupe, if not even better. So that was Duet and this is Robin. Yeah, it is hard to capture on camera. Okay, Natasha Denona, I'll give you a little bit of credit because it is really hard to capture a duochrome on camera, but I need you to see the duochrome of this shade. So here it is in the pan. Yeah, you can definitely see it more in the pan. When it hits the light, you can see that blue popping through. The Copacetic shimmer formula is one of my absolute favorites and this shade is no exception. So okay, we're talking a lot about that one shimmer. Now let's move on to the next shade, which is also a shimmer, and it's called Limoncello. Looks like it's supposed to be a yellowy shimmer, but between the Natasha Denona photos and Jenna's photos, I do think it has a bit of a greeniness to it, which makes sense because the matte green is a little more like chartreusey, greeny yellow. So I have a perfect match for that, also in my companion palette. The shade Jessica is like a gorgeous icy green, but with a goldenness to it. I know golden and icy seem kind of contradictory, but I feel like it works really well for this dupe shade. Yeah, you can see there's yellow there. Like when you first look at it, it just looks like a really pale pastel yellow, but it's definitely got some greeniness to it. Oh, that's a really good dupe. That's like a dead-on dupe. Ooh, we love it. Okay, so this is my dupe for the shade Limoncello. Okay, moving on to the next shade, we have a matte kind of periwinkle blue here. I have to dip into one more palette. I forgot about this. Dang it, you know what? It's okay. I'm gonna dip into the Sugar Pill Fun Size palette, and the shade 8-Bit is just a perfect matte periwinkle. You can find matte periwinkles honestly very easily. I know I also have a shade like this in my Shroud It's Freaking Bats palette. I have shades like this in my Odin's Eye Alva 2 palette. Like I have a lot of shades like this. I do not feel like this shade is hard to find and therefore not worth buying the whole Natasha Denona palette for. But here is my dupe for the shade Bubble. Now moving on to the shade under that, which is a matte peach, which I definitely have in my Blend Bunny Blends palette. That's another one. Finding a matte peach, not very difficult. I'm sure this is thrown in here as like a transition shade and all over the lid shade, but I definitely have one in the shade First Kiss from my Blend Bunny Blends palette. I feel like that one, you know, it's nice to have a transition shade like that in the palette, but you know, it's not gonna be a transition shade for everyone. I feel like she could have gone with a deeper peach, like a more like rusty peach, because anyone with a lighter skin tone can always go in with a lighter hand and like blend that out, but people with a deeper skin tone might not be able to build this up to be be a transition shade. So there's just so few deep mattes in this palette. Oh my gosh, but we'll get to that in a little while. This is my dupe for the shade Bellini. Okay, now moving on to the one shade that I have to dip into my Wilderness palette for, which I'm annoyed about because I feel like this shouldn't even be in the palette. It doesn't fit the pastel vibes, but that shade is the red shimmer, which is called Starlit. I will say, looking at Jenna's swatches, it looks a little more pastel red, even though pastel red's basically just pink, but I'm gonna go in with the shade Heat from the Wilderness palette because I feel like that's the closest dupe I had, but this is another reason why I'm not buying this palette, because I really don't wear shades like this very often. I at least don't wear them with pastels very often, you know? Like, I like a bold red shimmer every once in a while, but to me, it just doesn't really fit the color story. That's another reason why I don't really want this palette. The color story is very eclectic. Like, there's a lot of shades I do like in here. Like, if you like the top 3 mattes, I'm like, yes, give me everything. And then the next couple shimmers and this matte, I'm like, yes, give me everything. And then you just throw this red shimmer in the middle and I'm like, I don't want this here. I don't want this here at all. But anyway, let me stop rambling about that. Now I can put my Wilderness palette away, although I will say the next shade I could probably also get in the Wilderness palette. The shade Adriatic, that like shimmery, vibrant mint shade, I could definitely get from this palette too. So there's another option for you if you don't have the Copacetic palette. But I'm going back to my Copacetic Cosmetics Companion palette because this shade Meaghan is just so beautiful. One of the, if not the most beautiful shimmery green I own. Just absolutely stunning. I think formula-wise, this is just exceptional. And it's just got such a nice pasteliness to it too, you know, just a really, really beautiful minty pastel shimmer that I think is a perfect dupe for Adriatic. All of these shimmers look even more impactful with a glitter primer, by the way. I didn't want to get too sticky and put glitter primer all over my arm, but they all look even more beautiful with a glitter primer. Okay, so the next shade we have is a matte. It's called Brisk. So going back into my Blend Bunny Blends palette, I have a perfect dupe for that in the shade Inside Joke. I'm wearing that one on my lid. Oh, I forgot to tell you about my lid shades. Okay, so I have this shade Inside Out from the Blend Bunny Blends palette all over my lid, and then I went over it with Meaghan from the Copacetic Cosmetics Companion palette, because these two shades together are just absolute magic and give me beautiful shimmery goodness. So that's what's on the lid portion of my look. But okay, now let's swatch the shade Inside Out. Beautiful, stunning, fantastic, outrageous. Oh, I'm running out of room. Okay, I gotta try to squish these closer together. If only I had longer forearms. Okay, the next shade is called Dainty, and that's one that, like, I feel like the Natasha Denona swatches are giving us nothing. It really just looks like it disappears in the Natasha Denona swatches, but Jenna's swatches make it look like a nice shimmery pink. So I'm going with one of my favorite shimmery pinks, which is the shade Kaylie from the Copacetic Cosmetics Companion palette. I'll be honest with you, my shade's a lot more impressive than their shade is. My shade's got pink, it's got gold in it. It's probably a little more icy with less pigmentation underneath it. This is the only one that I'll give you like, okay, no, it's not a dead-on dupe. Hi, so watching the video back while editing, I'm pretty sure I flipped these two shades unintentionally. So I know I was just saying that my version of this shade was more iridescent. I feel like that lines up better with here, and the shade I end up swatching later for this shade lines up better with that shade. So that is the only amendment change I would make to my dupes. All right, and underneath that, we go to the only deep matte in this palette. I don't know why they would only choose one, and why that one they would choose would just be like this deep-ish purple. Deep-ish, I'm saying deep-ish. I honestly see this more as like a mid-tone, especially looking at Jenna's swatches. Like, it really doesn't look very deep at all. But I'm gonna dig into the shade Vamp from my Blend Bunny Blends palette. I feel like mine's gonna be more pigmented than theirs, but that's okay. So this is my dupe. Oh, what a beautiful buttery swatch. Oh, they're just so good. I just keep falling more and more in love with the Blend Bunny Blends palette as I do this video. But this is my dupe for that shade. This is another shade that I feel like does not belong here. As much as I love shades like this, it just really throws off the color story to me. Maybe it's thrown in there to balance out this strange shimmery red. Like, I guess you could put those two together. But I feel like stick to pastels. And like, if you're gonna throw a deeper shade in there, I feel like it should have been a deeper cool tone shade. Or maybe do one of each, like still keep this shade, but then throw in a deep vampy purple like this, or a deep blue like this. All of this to say, I think you should buy the Blend Bunny Blends palette instead, but let me move on to the next shade. Okay, the next shade in the swatches we're gonna do is called Mint Frost, and I know I used to have an exact dupe for this because I'm pretty sure this was a shade in the Natasha Denona Tropic palette. I had the mini version of this palette. I decluttered it because I did not like it. But whatever, that's not what this video is about. I have a dupe for this shade, and it's also in the companion palette. It is this shade Lexi, which is a beautiful icy minty green. I do feel like in the Natasha Denona swatches, it looks very similar to this shade Meaghan, which you might think it looks similar to the shade Meaghan too. I think my version is definitely a little lighter, so it makes sense here. But in their swatches, they look very similar to each other. In Jenna's swatches, I feel like the shades look more different from each other, like they look more justified in being there. So the Natasha Denona swatches do it less justice. I don't know why, but this is my little minty frost shade. Hi, Bert. Bert's back. He's just underneath me. You're gonna get covered in shimmers down there, sir. But this is my dupe for the shade Mint Frost. Okay, and now the next shade is called Illusion, which is really just a very basic ballerina pink type of shimmer. I'm so bored. Why would you put this in here? I guess it's good, you know, it could be a good brow bone highlight. It makes sense being here. I'm not judging it. I am judging it. I'm trying really hard not to, but I am. So this is the shade Lunar from Estate Makeup. It's one of their highlighters. It's a really beautiful formula too. Very like ColourPop Super Shock highlighter type of formula. Very moussey. So I'm just using that instead of using a shade from one of my palettes because honestly, it just feels like a highlighter shade to me anyways. And it's very basic. I'm sure if you have any neutral palette, you probably have like a lightish pinky highlighter shade like this. And I don't want to talk about it anymore because I'm bored. So moving on to the next and last shade. Oh my gosh, already, wow. The last shade I'm also taking from my Blend Bunny Blends palette. You can see it's kind of like a dusty pink in the Natasha Denona swatches. It is called Tool. And the closest thing I'd say I have to that is this shade Sunset from the Blend Bunny Blends palette. Maybe theirs is like a little more dusty mauve-y. Let's see how I feel when I swatch it. Honestly, the Blend Bunny Blends palette, you can really customize any shade to make it exactly how you want it because I have so many different tones. But okay, no, I feel pretty good about that. That looks pretty much like the Natasha Denona one. I will take a literal touch of the shade Truth. It's like this taupey shade, and then touch Sunset again because I feel like I could use that to make it dustier, just to show you how you can really manipulate the shades in this Blend Bunny Blends palette to give them whatever undertone you want. And now I feel like I have the perfect dupe for it. And you guys, that's it. That's all of the shades. Let me just make sure. Let me count them up. Make sure I got all of them. Yeah, okay, I just did the count. I got it. This is all of the shades. I'm gonna compare it side by side to the Natasha Denona shades. Like I said, I did mostly use Jenna's swatch photo to do swatch comparisons for this because I felt like her lighting felt more honest to me. You know, you can see her photos clearly taken in more natural lighting. Doesn't look very edited to me, which I really appreciate, but I did do my swatches based off the same order as the Natasha Denona one so I could keep track of the shades. But even looking at them next to each other, you can definitely tell that it's swatching the same palette. I think I did a pretty good job of cutting it in the middle here. And yeah, I'm so happy that I was able to dupe this whole palette relatively easily. Like I've said a million times in this video already, I would not buy this palette even if I didn't have all of these dupes because I don't find the color story to make a ton of sense. I think I would definitely use this palette as a companion palette if the formula ends up being good, which I've said before, I have an extreme distrust for Natasha Denona's pastel formula because I did not have a good experience with her Tropic palette. But if the formula turned out to be good, I would just use it as a companion palette because even though I like all of these shades individually, I just don't think they make a ton of sense together. I think there's portions of the palette that make sense together. Like clearly you've got all of these minty shades, which I think would tie nicely in with like the periwinkle shade and some of the pink shades. But then you have this red shade, which really can only be balanced out, I guess, with a deeper purple, maybe the ballerina pinks, but at that point, none of those are really pastel, so I don't feel like they fit. You know, like I was saying earlier, I would have much preferred for our deeper shades to go into deeper cool tone shades because there's so many pastel cool tones in the palette, but we're really missing like a deeper cool tone shade. How nice would it have been to have a really deep purple in here? That way you could do liner looks if you wanted to too. Have a nice deep blue in here. I just feel like why pick a warm tone, basically mid-tone purple? Like I really don't, it's deep. Yes, it's deep comparatively, but it's really not as deep as it could be. And why so warm toned when so much of the palette is cool tone? But that's just my thoughts on it. I would love to know what you guys think about this palette. Are you gonna be picking it up? Do you feel like you have dupes in your collection? I hope this inspired you to look through dupes in your collection. My process when trying to decide whether or not to buy a palette is I take out all of my palettes that I think might have like colors, and I go through one by one and I see if I can find a dupe for each one. And usually if I can dupe more than half of the palette, I'm like, okay, I'm not buying it. In this case, I can dupe 100% of the palette, so it makes it extra super easy. But yeah, let me know what you think. No judgment over here if you still want to buy the palette. Like I said, if I were to get this palette, if it were like gifted to me or something, I would use it as a companion palette, and I would still love having a lot of these colors. I just wouldn't pay, you know, $65 or whatever it costs full price. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I live stream on Saturdays, so I would love to have you subscribe. Check out my description box for all of the makeup on my face today. You guys, I forgot to mention what's on my lower lash line. It was the first color I swatched. That first purple shade that I swatched on my wrist here is on my lower lash line. So if you were wondering what that is, that was it. And then I also forgot to mention, oh geez, she's all over the place, that icy minty shade here from the Copacetic Cosmetics Companion Palette. This shade right here is on both my inner corner and a little bit on my brow bone. So now you get the full eye look, but if you want to see all those details written out, definitely check out my description box. And also in my description box, I will have a bunch of Black Lives Matter resources to support the Asian American community, resources to support the LGBTQ+ community, and resources to support Ukraine. I'd really appreciate it if you clicked on those links if you have the time, and I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!